I looked at the bitch who helped my wife sneak away with her lover. "What's wrong with you, D? I thought you were our friend. We were discussing what it meant to have a cheating spouse, and we all agreed, and now this? Oh, he's famous. It justifies everything. You'll get through this and soon forget. I always thought you were a little stupid, but I underestimated your idiocy. I want you to do one thing for me. Never talk to me again. You won't like it. If I drown and you pass by, keep walking. I'd rather die. Now get the hell away from me." It was easy to see that she was in shock. I've never talked to anyone in our circle like that. I turned and started to walk towards the door when a huge bouncer intercepted me. "Already leaving? Get out of my way." He grinned. "Drunk and aggressive. I think for everyone's sake you better get back to your table. Drink something, I'll make sure it's free." I looked at him until he started to get nervous. "How much is he paying you to interfere? It must be a lot, because if you don't get out of my way right now, you're going to need all that money." His eyes widened and he began to pout. "You can't beat me. I'll wipe the floor with your sorry ass and not even break a sweat." "It probably will, but there's something you should know. I don't fight fair and I don't forgive. I'll hit you the second your back is turned. Say you'll beat me, just kill me, because when I'm alive, I'll come for you. You'll have to look twice before you go out in the dark for the rest of your life. Maybe I'll hire a couple of guys and be thousands of miles away when this happens. I might even pay them a little more to make sure it's yours. The club's security career is over. If I can't get to you, I'll go after your family. Are you married? Are you going to puke every time I'm done? Now you have a choice." He didn't even realize he was retreating. It's funny, in fact, he was at least 6'5" tall and weighed almost 300. I was 5'11" and 180, and his fat-to-muscle ratio was clearly better than mine. I had one thing he didn't: pure, undiluted, nuclear rage. This cannot be defeated. I had almost reached the door when someone grabbed my arm. I grabbed the hand and twisted it, pulling the one who was holding me along with me. When I realized it was Janie, I let go and she landed on her butt with her skirt up and her legs spread. I never thought she walked around without underwear. I was about to leave when she grabbed my leg. "Don't do this. Think about your children." I looked at her with contempt. "You mean like she did when she snuck out the back door with that bastard? As for family, I don't have a family anymore. I will always do right by my children, unlike the bitch formerly known as my wife. Maybe I'll file for custody in the divorce. After all, her actions tonight prove that she's not fit to be a mother." She let go and covered her mouth with her hand. I actually made it to the elevator before another volley began. "Bob, think about it. Are you really going to throw away 10 years because of one night?" I looked at my former friend and his company. "I didn't throw anything away. She did. Look me in the eyes and tell me that you think what she did was acceptable. Every one of you assholes, look at me. I want every one of you to say that you think that what she did, not that bad, and if your wife did it, it would be okay. Oh, sorry, Harry, that train has already left. You know she's dating him again, don't you? Looks like Janie comes dressed, or rather undressed, for action. I didn't know she walked around without underwear. Is this some kind of signal for a woman of easy virtue?" Harry glared at Erica, and she lowered her head before walking back into the club. The others were shouting, mostly at each other, and I took the opportunity to slip into the elevator. It didn't take me long to pack my things. I left all of Linda's things where they were. If she wants them, let her come and get them herself. I found sexy lingerie, and my first thought was to pee on it, but in the end, I just threw it in the trash. It was like a symbol. I left 30 minutes later and got to the parking lot when I heard them. Apparently, my friends were following me. They began their argument, and Eric stood in front of my car door. "You have time before I start this thing to get out of my way. Anyone who doesn't get out will become a blot on the parking lot. Get out, now. Are you going to listen to us?" That's all he had time to say before I hit him. None of them were fighters or knew how to defend themselves. I knew because as a teenager I had a violent temper and got into fights a lot. This got me into trouble with the law several times, and when it came to counseling or juvenile prison, I opted for several sessions. This has helped me a lot with anger control. I still got angry, but I rarely lost control. At that moment, I didn't care. I stepped over him and opened the door, glancing back. I put it in gear and pressed the gas, and the wheels squealed. They scattered like quails. I had no idea where I was going or what I would do when I arrived. She had already been gone for almost an hour by then, so she had most likely already had sex with him. My first instinct was to find them and kill them, but I doubted that would happen for a number of reasons. This guy was the best tight end on the local professional football team, and the hopes were pinned on his ability to win that season, possibly a championship. He had just signed a 3-year contract worth $106 million on top of the millions he had already earned. His home was probably better protected than Fort Knox. Plus, I wasn't a martial arts expert or a former Navy SEAL. I was just a guy. A guy in good shape, but still just a guy. I had no access to unlimited wealth, no friends in high or low circles. I was sitting at a traffic light when it dawned on me. There was something I could do, and now was the time to start. I realized that if I go forward, there will be no turning back. I stopped at a 24-hour diner advertising free Wi-Fi. Before I started, I thought about my plan. If I wanted revenge and a little redress, social media was the way to go. Linda had every possible account: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even something called TikTok. I wasn't an it nerd, I could barely get online, but I knew someone who could: my niece. She had just turned 18 and had 4 scholarship offers, 2 from the Ivy League and 2 from technical colleges on both coasts. I called her, and she was very surprised to hear from me so late, but when I told her that I would pay her $500 if she would come and help me, she became very interested. I was about to tell her where I was when I heard a ping. "Found you, Uncle. We'll be there in 7 minutes." I wondered who "we" were, but as she drove, I didn't care. While I was waiting, I went inside and asked the waitress for a quiet booth as far away from people as possible. Then I surprised her. "You close at midnight, right?" She nodded. "How many customers are you expecting before closing, and how much will their tip be? While you're thinking, let me tell you that 2 of my friends are coming over soon, and I'd like us to spend as much time here alone as possible. Tell the owner that I'll compensate for any losses. Income if he lets us sit here and work for an hour or so, and you'll make 200 if you bring us drinks and coffee." She smiled. "It's the end of February, and it's terribly cold outside. Everyone who could is either hanging out somewhere or warming up at home. I'll close right now. I can afford it since I'm the owner of the establishment. Give me 400, 3 for me and 1 for my cook. Do you need anything else before I send him home?" My niece arrived just at that moment, and there was a guy with her. She looked pretty cute for a geek. I almost didn't recognize her. She seemed to look really good when she took off her ripped jeans and gaming t-shirts and put on a dress. It was a bright red club dress that barely covered her very beautiful ass. I wondered for a moment if my sister knew she had these clothes. She certainly didn't look like the little tomboy I remembered. I immediately apologized. "Sorry, guys. If I had known what you had planned, I would never have asked you to come. I'm sure you'll think I'm crazy, but hear me out. First, let me tell you what happened." When I finished, they looked at me with their mouths open. Nanette stuttered indignantly. "Let's get this straight. Your wife, my aunt, left you standing alone in a club to spend the night with some superstar athlete, while your friends covered for her while she slipped away. What kind of asshole friends do you have?" This is uncharted waters for me. In fact, they are her friends, who she hung out with in high school and college. She was overjoyed when my company wanted to promote me to this position at this location. She was waving her finger at Chicago out the back window when we left. I talked to them for a while and thought that we had the same views on life. I can assure you that we are no longer friends. Let me tell you what I want, and then you will tell me how bad this idea is and what kind. I'll get into trouble if I do that. I stated what I wanted, and both Eric and Nanette looked at each other before bursting into laughter. When they recovered, Nanette asked Eric to get the black box from his car. The black box turned out to be an unregistered laptop that she had slightly modified. No one will be able to trace this. I will ping stations all over the world and not stop on one for more than half a second. I have been working on this since I was 13 and kept it a secret until I was of age to file for patents. That explains a lot. Why did all those schools want me? And why did the Army offer me a really sweet deal to skip college and go straight to work for them? Nanette asked a lot of questions as she set up the laptop. "Ready," she exclaimed, showing me my wife's Facebook page. "I'm in. Let the chaos begin." They scrolled through her posts, stopping to ask who the various people were while Nanette took notes on her phone. When a photo of her best friend appeared and the organizers were cheating, I almost lost control. Then I thought and named the names of my so-called friends who were with us. She took over every account in minutes. Nanette smiled as she looked at Dee. "This bitch needs a good shake. Are you ready? Make it as disgusting as possible." Eric was pretty quiet. "Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no turning back. You'll blow up your family." "I'm sure. I haven't thought about anything else since this all started. There's no way in hell I could live with her again." She set off a bomb. I respond by going on full alert and considering nuclear options. "Get started." Nanette started typing, pretending to be my wife. "Exciting update. I'm proud to announce that I've officially joined the celebrity club." Her fib. It sounded raunchy and somehow cool at the same time. "I'm with Mark. I'm so proud that he chose me out of all the women in the club. Thank you so much to my best friend for distracting my husband while I slipped away. I'd say I owe it to her, but I've done the same for her more than once. Remember the bachelorette party in Atlantic City, D? And according to you, he's great with the puck. Ha ha." Nanette added a bunch of emojis. Then she started again. "We're resting now, a break, so to speak. We'll start the second half soon. I hope it goes into overtime." She then forged messages from every woman who was in the club, literally passing them on to each other and saying they couldn't wait to get their turn with the famous one. Janie berated her husband for having a small manhood and said she was going crazy needing real sex. He didn't need to be rich, just well-equipped. She found some pictures of the bastard and posted them, as well as a few of Linda in a tiny bikini that she was embarrassed to wear at home, but only wore on vacation. "Just want you to know what we bring to the game." By then it was almost midnight, but her notifications were lighting up as people viewed the posts. I'm sure the phones were ringing in her social circle, despite the late hour. Nanette then set Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok on fire. I didn't have to worry about her getting calls because I was sure she had turned off the phone, so I couldn't interfere with her plans. The comments started pouring in. "Is this some kind of joke? I'm sure your husband doesn't think it's funny. What's wrong with you?" It was from her favorite aunt. I idly wondered why she wasn't asleep yet. Nanette answered, "This is no joke. I saw an opportunity and took it. How many people can say they had sex with someone famous? If you don't believe me, come to his house around 10 in the morning. 130 Wyndham Circle. It's a damn mansion. The rich really are different. We will probably be on our feet by then, and you will be able to see my path of shame leaving his house. Although, perhaps this is the path of glory." Another person joined the discussion. I didn't know her, but that didn't matter. She had over 700 friends, and they were all getting information. "Seriously, are you proud of the fact that you left your husband standing and went to have sex with someone else? Do you really think your marriage will survive?" This. "I love my husband. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. And he loves me, so I know he can handle it. It might be a little hard, but I'll try to pamper him, and in time he'll forgive me. It's okay doesn't mean it's just one night and I'll never do it again." "Seriously? Are you drunk? He drugged you, what? As for you never doing it again, did you think you'd do it the first time? You're delirious. I'm unfriending you. Don't try to mess with me." I hope in the light of day you will still think it was worth it. This may be all you have left. I finally found out the name. It was her boss's wife. This gave me another idea, and Nanette posted everything on the company page. I'm sure she'll have interesting conversations on Monday. Another person added a comment. It's all nonsense, isn't it? If you think it's funny, you're sorely mistaken. Every word is true. We'll be okay. I believe in my husband. What about his faith in you? I think the only explanation is that you were hit by the Martian ray of depravity. It redirects all the blood in your body to your crotch and makes you incapable of intelligent action. I've seen some stupid decisions before, but this tops them all. It's almost Darwin Award level, but it usually ends in death. Although maybe the death of your marriage qualifies you. I'm with Rosalind. Don't try to answer because you'll be blocked. It was from her cousin. She lived in another state, and I wondered how long it would take for the entire extended family to know the details. Nanette looked sad. She always loved Linda. You're destroying her, cutting the foundations of her life out from under her. Are you sure you don't want to stop now? Not quite yet. I have a few more things to do, and then I'll be done with her. Literally. We sent posts to the team's website, the NFL offices, the offices of his charities, the mayor, the city council, everyone on their official websites, and anyone else we could think of. Nanette flooded Instagram and Twitter. It was like a nuclear explosion. Posts and comments poured in as fast as they could. She then found his accounts and did the same. He was considered an example for athletes participating in public life. He had 2 charities, and he always volunteered for something. The team and the league adored him. Time to inflict some pain. Eric found the name and number of a sports journalist who hated this guy for some unknown reason. The journalist was a little annoyed at being yanked out of bed, but calmed down when I told him what I had. Eric used a voice scrambler on his phone, and it made me sound like a woman. Stop whining. I'm giving you the opportunity. Mark is currently sleeping with a married woman in his house. He knew she was married because he pulled her out of the shadow lounge tonight. Apparently, this isn't the first time he's done this. Talk to the bouncer if you don't believe me. Her name is Linda Hamilton. She's been married for 10 years and has 2 small children. So much for a model NFL athlete, huh? We later found out that he was angry because Mark pulled the same trick on him. He and his wife were separated for almost a year before they reconciled, and their relationship was still on the rocks. It was also the off-season with not much going on in local sports, which probably made the story more compelling. Just to be fair, we sent emails to local TV stations and newspapers. I doubted anything would come of it, but Mark was well known and very popular, and the sharks smell blood in the water. By 6 in the morning, 2 vans and 1 regular reporter were parked at the gates of his exclusive area, along with paparazzi. By 8, someone from the team or central office sent someone to knock on his door. He opened the door in his robe, and the cameras zoomed in from the positions the videographers had found. Luck was not on their side, because Linda was clearly visible behind him, also in a robe. Frenetic, the click of the cameras was clearly audible. His eyes widened when he saw the reporters, and the man walked inside and slammed the door. That person must have told him the whole story, and Linda immediately opened her Facebook page. The house was a brick mansion, but you could clearly hear the screaming even from behind the gate. It was a deadly scream, wounded animal. She furiously tried to close her account, only to find that access was blocked. Nanette later counted over 3,000 comments across all media platforms in just the first 6 hours. Linda has never been more popular. By 10, they finally left the house. Linda had her head covered, but everyone knew who it was. I had a hard time believing the coverage, but then again, he was a popular figure, and it was a weekend, so news was slow. She got into a certain person's car, and he drove around the house, exiting through the service entrance. This was not their first rodeo, and the paparazzi were also on duty at this entrance. They even took a clear photo of Linda as she drove by. The man took her home, and I wonder what she was thinking when she found herself alone. I picked up the children from the nanny and took them to their parents. I wasn't surprised to see Linda's parents there because we were all very close. Both mothers were friends on Facebook, so they saw everything. However, she was not alone. 4 cars had followed her home, and now they knew her address. She ran out of the car and ran to the front door as questions were thrown at her. Is she his girlfriend now? She left her husband for him? Does her husband approve of this? This was a particularly stupid question, but it was asked many times over the next few weeks. It was a little tense when I spoke to her parents. We know what she did. The whole southern part of the country knows. We also know that it wasn't her on Facebook. Judging by her actions, she is not that smart, but she was never suicidal. How could you do this to her? Ask her the same thing and come back to me. I wasn't going to keep her from seeing the kids, but I wanted a couple of days for things to calm down. I stayed where Linda least expected to find me, in the room we had rented for our romantic weekend. The clerk at the counter looked at me strangely when he checked the records, but gave me a room for 3 days. It was fun to meet my old friends as they checked out, and I headed to my room to relax. By then, I had been awake for 30 hours, running on adrenaline and rage. Dee rushed towards me. You bastard, do you have any idea how much you hurt Linda? All for the sake of an empty fantasy that she wanted to fulfill. She would be the same when she returned home. No, it was damaged, and when something is damaged, I have 2 choices. I have to decide if it's worth fixing, and if I think the cost is too high, or get rid of it. Linda damaged or it's defective beyond recognition, and the price for repairs is too high. I never slept with that hockey player. So you're admitting that you dated him? From what I understand, you had dinner with him and then went dancing. Even if you didn't sleep with him, it was a fantasy opportunity, wasn't it? My husband would be upset if you told him, but hey, you can make him forgive you, right? The rest of her group stood aside, but at the mention of the hockey player, her husband rushed forward. I'll tell you. Like I told the bouncer, I don't fight fair. I fight to win. I hit him, then looked down, then pointed to the cameras in the hallway. It's all recorded, man. Your attempt to attack me and my reaction in self-defense. Write it down as a life lesson and focus on what you'll do with your bitch. I looked at my former friends. I want you to remember this for the rest of your life. I'll get divorced soon, but I'll bet good money that I'm not the only one. You need to think about it and make decisions. I'd wish you luck, but honestly, I hope your lives blow up as much as you helped blow up mine. Despite pleas and demands, I never spent the night in my old house again. Linda was very angry at first, not understanding why I was reacting the way I did. It was just not that big of a deal. Yes, she could have left me in the worst possible situation and spent the night with a complete stranger, but that's all in the past, and it's time to move on. He's famous, for God's sake. It's all over, so why not go back to normal? True, she had a crush on that bastard ever since we lived in Chicago and he played there. I used to watch the Bears sometimes, and Linda would watch with me. When a charity poster came out featuring him in long knit underwear and nothing else, she bought one. It must have been a dream when he asked her to dance. When she realized I wasn't going to just go home like a good boy, she became a bitch. When she was served with a divorce summons citing adultery as the reason, she was furious. Linda made all possible threats, but I resisted. Linda fell to her knees and was surprised that I showed no mercy. She barely managed to hold down her job. It was borderline, and it was a long time before her boss told her more than was necessary, and even longer before his wife even acknowledged her presence. We were ordinary people, and everything would have died down if it weren't for who she slept with. The paparazzi had their way, and after offering enough money, the bouncer laid it all out. There were at least 3 other cases at this club. Mark loved to have fun. Very. I'm willing to bet he soon wished he had signed with another team when he left Chicago. The Panthers were a Carolina team, and North Carolina was a state with a law for foreigners' attachments. He should have bought a house across the state line. My lawyer advised against suing him until the divorce was finalized, but he, his team, and the NFL went into full defense mode. One evening, a man with a suitcase knocked on my new apartment. "Sir, I would like to talk." "Go away." I slammed the door and latched the locks. He was banging so hard that I called the police, and they politely asked him to leave. He looked at the security camera I had installed and walked away, shaking his fist. Then the new team owner called me. He introduced himself, and before he could continue, I interrupted him. "How did 4 people in the world get my number?" He sighed. "Does it matter? I would." I hung up and immediately went to the cell phone store and asked for a new number. He lasted 8 days before they called me again. "Sir, I represent the charity Go Deep. May I have a minute of your time?" "Sorry, but I already support 3 charities and don't have the funds to contribute to another. All the best." Wait, I'm not asking for a donation. In fact, it's the opposite. I'm willing to offer you a significant amount. "Why do you want to give me money?" "Sir, founder and major donor Mark Law." I hung up again and blocked his number. They found out my new email address and sent long letters about how my actions had hurt the charity and how much donations had dropped. I couldn't resist answering by calling them. "So it's my fault that charity is suffering? How, exactly?" "Your allegations against Mark have tarnished his reputation and caused him unacceptable suffering. If you had publicly said that you forgive him and your wife for their temporary loss of sanity and allowed him to set things right, public interest would have waned. Let's be clear. This man seduced my wife, in my presence and in front of about 50 witnesses, and the petty bandit he bribed tried to stop me when I went after them. She stayed the night, and although she won't admit that they had sex, we all know that it happened. Let him make a public statement that he had sex with my wife, although he knew that she was married, and I will think about it. It's not in anyone's interest. Can't we persuade you to leave everything as it is? This old dog doesn't sleep. He growls and foams at the mouth, ready to bite someone's ass. Let's just say, let him donate all his money to a scientist so he can invent a time machine, come back and not have sex with my wife, and we'll talk. In the meantime, if he thinks it's bad now, don't call me anymore. What do you? I talked to Eric and Nanette, complaining about not being able to hang up the phone. This gave them an idea, and they invented an app to do just that. It reproduced the sound of an old-fashioned telephone hitting a counter and could be used when you wanted to hang up on someone. I'm sure many telemarketers have gotten a nasty surprise over the next few months. They patented it and included me in the documentation, saying that although it was their technical idea, it was based on mine. 33 cents isn't much until you multiply it 50,000 times in the first 2 months alone. Then it turned into serious money. I used it to buy a real house instead of the apartment I was living in, and the kids were happy about it. It hurt me to part with them, but every time I looked at Linda, I wanted to kill her on the spot. The poor woman was delirious, seriously delirious. She thought I would just accept what she did and move on with my life. Her favorite line was, "It was just one night." Yes, it was. One night is too many. Tell the truth, you knew I would never let this happen if I knew in advance, so you used your prostitute friends to distract me so you could sneak off with your lover like a thief. Because you were the thief. You stole our future that night, Linda, and you have no one to blame but yourself and your famous lover. Damn it, he's probably laughing about it. As we say, he doesn't care if he destroyed the family as long as he gets the free sex you willingly provided. She was shocked. I rarely raised my voice in anger, especially in front of children. I don't think I ever did that with her either. Maybe that was the problem. She thought that I was weak and would be afraid that she would leave me. If she had to, she would use the children to keep me in line. The children took it badly. I eventually got them into therapy, and it started to help. The therapist was careful not to denigrate their mother. She told them that their mother had made a very serious mistake and was now reaping the consequences. She invited us to a few sessions separately, and since I paid for it, I received a summary of the sessions. She is still in denial and tells the children that although she made a mistake, it is not serious enough to get a divorce. Your little girl asked her directly what she did, and she replied that it was an adult matter and she would understand in a few years. Your son is only 4, but he remembers what he sees and hears in the media. She never answered his questions directly. She simply said that she made a terrible mistake, and I think he did not buy it and has a lot of hostility towards it. Mother. I was asked the same questions in my session, and I answered as honestly as I could. Yes, son, I'm divorcing your mother because of what you heard. She broke a promise and a commitment by doing this. You know, when you make a promise, you have to keep it. It's a little deeper when you're an adult. She made those promises to 200 people in both a legally and spiritually binding manner, and she knew what would happen if she broke them. She did it anyway. I still love your mother, but I don't trust her anymore, and trust is the key issue here. I promised to pick you up from school on Wednesdays and did that for a year. And then one day I didn't show up, leaving you standing. I knew I should pick you up, but I decided I wanted to do something different. How many times will you wait? Me before you realize you can't trust me. Will you trust me when I say it will never happen again? I think I got through to them a little and followed the therapist's instructions to the letter. I didn't say anything bad about their mother. I said that although our relationship has changed, we both love them very much. Other than that, I didn't talk about their mother unless they brought it up themselves. Linda did the exact opposite. She told the children that yes, she had made a serious mistake, but not enough to warrant a divorce. She told them that I was just being stubborn and everything would work out. The therapist was furious and met with her in session. How could you do this to the kids? Your husband shows no desire to reconcile. In fact, in one of our sessions, he talked to the kids about divorce. They have enough classmates in similar situations to have a basic understanding of how things work. They have also seen enough parents remarry to know that there may be someone new in their lives at some point. Your children believe, and rightfully so, that your relationship with your husband is over. I know you've spoken several times, but it didn't work, and I think I understand why. You still refuse to admit that you did anything wrong, at least wrong enough to get a divorce. I strongly recommend marriage counseling. I don't believe it will help you reconcile, but maybe it will lead to a place where you can accept how things are and move on. I won't be doing any more sessions. Thank you for participating in the ones I asked for. This had no impact on Linda's world except for the mention of counseling. Her lawyer was quite good, and the judge ordered 8 sessions. If the therapist decides after 4 sessions that there is no room to move forward, she may stop any further sessions. On the other hand, if she sees progress, she may add more sessions. My lawyer tried to stop me, but I stood up and asked the judge if I could speak. He nodded, warning me to be polite. Your Honor, I need to be clear. I have no interest in any further relationship with my wife other than to be a rival for our children. However, I will attend the sessions, but I absolutely refuse to attend more than 8. That's enough. To resolve any issues. I'm serious, Your Honor. Yes, you can jail me or fine me or both if I refuse, but think about it. This scam is getting a lot of attention in the media, and I'm sure you are. You don't want this to turn into a swamp of dirty attacks, and I'm more than happy to talk to the press. One more thing, Your Honor. I want her lover to sit in on one session and explain why he thinks sleeping with married women is good idea and why he thinks it shouldn't affect my marriage. Thank you, sir. My lawyer looked at me like I had 2 heads, and the judge didn't know whether to laugh or throw me under the bus. Linda looked like she was going to be sick, and her lawyer was trying to find something to argue with. Finally, the judge struck his gavel twice. I don't have the authority to send him to a marriage counseling session unless it's his marriage. I'll write a letter asking for it to be looked into, but don't get your hopes up. Your lawyer may tell you that it's perfectly legal to request his presence here in court, but that it's completely up to you. Lawyers provide a list of therapists or get one from the court, but I want all parties to agree and the sessions will start in 2 weeks. I also require 2 sessions per week, so this can end as soon as possible. Any of your clients will miss the session. I will not threaten them with prison. I will simply recognize the session as valid, and they will not be able to reschedule it. Bailiff, let's start the next case. Linda was unhappy. At all. She was waiting for me in my car with a determined look on her face. This has to stop. Please, this is not what I planned. It seemed to me that talking to her without our lawyers was a bad idea, but curiosity got the better of me. For the sake of conversation, what did you think would happen? I thought you would be angry, but love me enough to overcome it. It was one night. All the years that we were together, our family, our children, it was not worth giving up everything because of one night. It wasn't just one night. It was every night for the rest of our lives after that night. What you did was cold, calculated, and disrespectful in the extreme. You left me looking like a fool in front of our so-called friends, and some of them even helped you sneak away. I'd bet my life on your love for me and our children until that night, Linda. We're done, and all the counseling in the world won't fix that. Wait, I need a favor. What possible favor can you ask of me? This is about Mark. Can you please ease the pressure on him a little? It's starting to affect his charities. Think about the kids. You mean the way you and he thought of ours that night? I don't care about his charities, and I promise, very soon the charities will be the least of his problems. Tell me, how did you know that? She lowered her head with enough guilt. He called me. Really? How did he get your number? Her face turned even redder, and it dawned on me. You gave it to him that night, didn't you? Why? In case he wanted to do it again. It's not like that. I don't know why I gave it, I just did. I should have known you wouldn't help. I just laughed and got into the car, wondering how she could have gotten so stupid. Maybe he really has the super sexual ability to reach her brain and mix it up. While all this was going on, I was under pressure to be reasonable. The league, the team, every football-related organization, his charities, several sports talk shows all pressured me to leave it. Even my boss, a big fan of the team, pushed a little. I responded by finding another job. I think he realized too late how I might respond and what it would look like to everyone else in our organization and to the public. He tried to retreat and hold me back, but it was too late. I wonder how angry he was about the complaint I filed with corporate HR. I think his future in the company was in jeopardy, and deservedly so. It got so far that I started recording every conversation I had. I didn't talk about it for the first few, but then I started, and it led to some pretty short conversations. The sports presenter we called that night invited me on his radio show. It was his top show in terms of listenership, and I dropped a few bombs, snippets of conversations I'd had with different people. The conversation with the team owner was particularly popular. He called, outraged, and threatening to sue me. The presenter could hardly contain his laughter. You don't see him, but my guest is nodding his head. Do you want to say something? I nodded when the microphone came on, and the first thing I did was laugh. What are you going to try me for? For the truth. I checked, and in this state, it is completely legal to record conversations without informing the other party. It's called consent of one party. Plus, I'm not going to use the conversation for legal purposes unless you insist. My lawyer says we have a good case against you, the team as a whole, and the National League for Harassment and Unacceptable Mental Suffering. Still want to say something? He hung up. The show was picked up by several syndicated programs and briefly made national news. I never heard anything more from them. Mr. Mark found that the press ignored him unless someone wanted to ask about the divorce. He was used to being a hero and being the center of attention, and this really upset him. Even though his lawyers told him not to say anything and to be careful, he finally broke down and did something stupid. He came to my house. The first thing I did was install a security system in the house. Ironically, he was the one who advertised this company, and it was really worth the money. One night, there was a knock on the door, and when I looked at the phone, the Ringer camera showed 3 very large men standing on my porch. They didn't look happy. I had my children with me, so I pressed the silent panic button, which automatically called the police. They called immediately. You'd be surprised how many people accidentally trigger anxiety. Sir, this is 911. Have you sounded the alarm? Yes. There are three very large men standing on my porch. Three men I don't know, three men who don't look happy. I didn't answer the door, and now they're knocking and demanding that I let them in. Sir, we have a patrol car 4 minutes away. If you fear for your safety, do not answer the door. I thanked them and waited 3.5 minutes before I opened the door, making sure that Bariana the door was locked. How can I help? Mark sent us to negotiate with you. You will immediately cease any legal action against him. And if I don't agree, then we will give you a lesson in cooperation. Gentlemen, you are on private property. Please leave immediately. The biggest of them sighed. Well, guys, looks like the man needs some convincing. The storm door could have been made of foam. He ripped it off its hinges so easily. They were about to enter when a voice was heard behind them. Police, stop immediately and turn around with your hands up. If looks could kill, they wouldn't have to touch me to get what Mark wanted. The biggest one looked like he was about to enter when his buddies talked him out of it. Soon they were all lying on the ground with handcuffs on their hands. The sergeant took my report and, after reviewing the records, charged them all with the felony of trespassing on private property. I later learned that felony trespassing has much harsher penalties. The difference is that ordinary entry is usually a spontaneous decision and there is usually no serious criminal intent. If you come onto someone's property specifically to cause harm, that's a completely different category. It turned out that one of them was a gardener at the stadium, and the other was simply a friend of the third. The third was on the practice squad and was immediately fired. It turned out that Mark promised him a place on the team if he would do him this favor, although he did not have the authority to do so. The rest received $1,000 each. It cost Mark a lot more because he had to pay attorney fees. I don't know how much it cost him, but they all admitted guilt and received a huge fine, which Mark had to pay. He had to stand trial for orchestrating this, and even his status as a hero couldn't save him. His lawyers reduced the charge to a misdemeanor. He had to pay a $5,000 fine and perform 200 hours of community service. TMZ filmed him in an orange vest picking up trash on the highway. It went on YouTube and got 600,000 views in the first week. Linda turned out to be the most expensive piece of sex he had ever sought. Some fans turned against him, and although it was not shown on television, there were posters in the stadium when the new season began. This was affecting his playing, and one group was holding a large banner. Put someone's wife on the goal line, it motivates him. Of course, stadium security forced them to take it down, but it was too late. It went viral within 3 hours and received 750,000 views in the first 2 days. Mark was going from a status figure to a player who saw little playing time, and one of his sponsors canceled a promotion they were preparing just until things settled down, which meant never. The law of probability caught up with me one night. They came out of nowhere, 4 of them. I was severely beaten. These guys knew what they were doing because it all happened in 90 seconds. I don't know how much damage they would have done if it weren't for a colleague who left the office right after me. When he screamed, they showed their professionalism by immediately running away. 10 minutes later, I was in the ambulance, and an hour later, I was in the ward, where I was kept overnight for observation due to a concussion. My head hurt badly, and I periodically lost consciousness. I woke up one day and thought I saw Linda sitting there, but immediately went back to sleep for a short time. When I woke up again, I was alone. It took 7 days before I was able to return to work. Police captured some surveillance images from several businesses across the street, but there was nothing identifiable. The policeman who took my statement gave me advice. If you've made someone really angry recently, you need to tell me about it. These guys were professionals. They avoided the cameras as much as possible, wore big hats and loose clothing, so we didn't get any faces or recognizable features like tattoos or scars. I told him my sad story. They told me Mark laughed when questioned and admitted he didn't love me but had nothing to do with the attack. They didn't believe him for a second, but they had no proof. I had to give up my weekends with the kids. I wasn't physically ready, and I didn't want them to see me until the bruises went away. Linda was horrified by what happened, but agreed. She even offered to come and help. I politely declined. The counseling sessions dragged on, as they often do. It was a wash, rinse, repeat cycle that went on for 4 sessions until even the therapist got tired of it. In the 5th session, she asked us not to interrupt while she was speaking. We're at an impasse, and frankly, I don't think we'll ever get past it. Linda, you refuse to admit that what you did was wrong by normal standards, and you refuse to think that it should ruin your marriage. Seriously, you left your husband standing in the middle of the club where you came as a prelude to a romantic weekend. You had new underwear, you were very intimate before and during the club, and then, bam, you left to spend the night with another man. You did this completely without warning and used your friends to stop him from stopping you. Tell me, if he did this to you, left you standing in a public place, surrounded by his so-called friends who were part of the deception, would you understand? Judging by your actions and statements here, I highly doubt it. Wait until I talk to your husband. She turned to me with a sad expression on her face. You'll never get back to her, that's clear as day. It's obvious from every interaction with you. I understand, I really do, but let me ask you this. Until the moment she left the club with another man, you loved her. She's been faithful and reliable all these years. Your wife says it was a one-time thing, something even she doesn't understand, but it was important enough to jeopardize her marriage. She swears she has it. Past, and she will never do anything like that again. Is there something inside you that is ready to try again? I will let your wife speak first. Please don't interrupt. Do you agree? She nodded to Linda, and we waited a minute while she collected her thoughts. You know, you talked a lot about how I have little remorse for my actions. I have remorse, great remorse. I never thought that this would cause such harm to our marriage as to lead to divorce. I knew that I would hurt you very much. Hurt you, and I knew you would be angry, but seriously, I never thought you would react the way you did. I am terribly sorry that my actions hurt you, and I can assure you in the strongest possible terms that I will never do anything like that again, especially now that I know the price I have to pay for it. I beg you, even if you don't completely forgive me, come home and let me make things right. She seemed satisfied with her speech and looked at me expectantly. You can say whatever you want, Linda, but you knew on some level how much it would hurt us. You knew I wasn't the passive guy who would just roll over and say, well, it's just this one time. And she says she won't do it again. Nonsense. If I did that, you'd lose all respect for me, and maybe you wouldn't actively seek it out. But if another opportunity came along, you'd be gone like an arrow, knowing that I will forgive. I don't forgive now and would never put myself in a situation where I had to forgive again. Besides the blatant disrespect you showed, the destruction of trust in my marriage sealed the deal. If you were gone for more than 30 minutes, I would already be wondering if you were having sex with him or someone else. Let me make this as clear as possible to you. We are not staying married. You can drag it out, use all the delay tactics, but eventually the court will get tired of all this, and it will happen. Please don't drag this out any longer. I looked at the therapist. Are we done here? She sighed. Yes, I will give my report to the court no later than Wednesday, saying that the marriage is irreparably damaged and recommending that the divorce be granted. No, I'm not giving up. Please, darling, think about the children. I think about the children. I think about them every damn day when they're not with me. Tell me, Linda, if the children were so important to you, how many times did you think about them while you were sleeping with him in his mansion? Was it worth it? Are they trips? For you, probably. For the rest of your family who still lived in the real world, not so much. Face it, Linda, you ruined everything. On purpose. See you in court. I think there, at the end, the consequences of her actions finally started to sink in. By the end, everyone was just exhausted. Her lawyer was exhausted. My lawyer was exhausted. The judge was exhausted. One of the bailiffs looked as if he had aged 5 years during this time. After the therapist's report, the judge blocked another attempt to delay the process and declared us divorced. Linda walked out of court without saying a word, and my lawyer smirked when I asked the question. Now, He smiled a brutal smile worthy of a rabid mountain lion. Yes, now. Mr. Mark was stunned the next day by the claim of foreigners' attachments. Shouldn't have signed with the Panthers or bought a house in North Carolina. I heard his swearing was epic. He can't do this. His lawyer sighed. Unfortunately, it can. This is still very much the case in North Carolina. Before you start, yes, it is an archaic law that should have been repealed years ago. Most states have done this. Unfortunately, this is not one of them. My advice is to settle as quickly as possible and close the case. Bad publicity could cost you more than the settlement. Everyone around him called. His lawyers called, the CEOs of his charities called. The team called, even the NFL commissioner called. Everyone begged me to settle the case out of court. The offers kept growing, and even my lawyer said I should settle, but I refused. It didn't matter if I got anything. The main thing was to drown him in the mud. The investigators hired by my lawyer got the bouncer and the group leader to admit that they were paid to help Mark secure targets. Mark tried to avoid appearing in court, but since he had to testify several times, he had no choice. One of his appearances was scheduled for Friday night, and he tried to avoid it by saying he had to fly to another city to prepare for a rare Saturday game. The judge was not a football fan. Take a later flight and be in this room tomorrow. I think he scheduled us as late as possible just to piss him off. Mark had charm, and his lawyers tried to fill the jury with women, but my lawyer was smart enough to outmaneuver them several times. They got 7 women, but 3 were over 50 and happily married, 1 was gay, 2 were young and single, and the last one was blonde and recently divorced. 2 of the men were young and single, but the other 3 were married and middle-aged. At first he said that he had never seen her, and they showed the way and the ride of shame so that he had to admit that she was at his house. He then denied they had sex, saying he was trying to protect her from her abusive husband. Linda thought that if she described her experience in a letter, I would better understand her point of view, and since the letter was written to me and was in my possession, we were able to present it in court. Nobody believed the version with the cruel husband. The final nail in the coffin was Linda's performance on the stand. She told everything, including the number of acts. I didn't know the exact number. Her letter said it was 3 or 4 times, but in fact there were 5. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning with a verdict. Part of the trial involved full financial disclosure, and I think everyone in the courtroom was amazed to learn how rich he was. He was in the NFL for 7 years and amassed a net worth of $96 million. I think my lawyer nearly fainted when the jury awarded me about a third of that amount, $30 million. It was the largest award in state history, but was in line with what other spouses had received. The largest award before this was $8.8 million. The law had recently changed, but still allowed up to a third of a defendant's assets to be awarded. Of course, when this law was adopted, hardly anyone thought that such millions would ever be involved. There was an effort in the state legislature to repeal the law, but it failed to pass committee. Lucky for me. His lawyers boasted and tried to appeal, while secretly advising him to accept the deal and forget about it. They filed a notice of intent to appeal, but abandoned it after a month and accepted the court's decision. It turned out that there was a loophole in the law whereby if the defendant's wealth increased during the appeal process and he still lost, the award was adjusted accordingly. In a couple of months, he was supposed to be paid a huge amount under the contract. The day after I received the award, my lawyer filed 4 more lawsuits for other couples and divorced men and women who came forward. Of the 4, 2 were divorced, 1 was still on the rocks, and the other couple turned out to be people who switched their sex partners and thought it was funny that he chose her. But when the money train was about to leave the station, they jumped on board. The divorced wives, including Linda, filed separate lawsuits. I already had a big piece of the pie, and some enticements happened years ago, and they quickly settled out of court for $4 million each. Mark still had several tens of millions left. The saga is not over yet. It turned out that he had an affair with the wife of one of his teammates and spent the night with another. This was a fact that the investigators discovered, and I was happy to share this information. On the next play, several players either fell or blocked in the wrong direction, and he was hit hard 3 times, the last time leaving him in concussion protocol. There was plausible deniability, but everyone knew that continuing his play with the Panthers was not an option. He was traded to Green Bay, where he performed well but not outstandingly. His income took a hit when the Panthers refused to pay his contract, citing a morals clause. He had to be content with 20% of what he could have received. The trade to Green Bay was a 1-year deal, and when it expired, they refused to pay him what he wanted, and he ended up in Denver with another 1-year deal worth $4 million. He tried his best, and after his contract expired, several teams showed interest, but offered significantly less salary. He eventually signed with Cincinnati for 2 years for $2.5 million. It had strict moral clauses, including confiscation of everything he earned if he was caught in a compromising situation. Although his play was consistent, it was not at the level of his best years, and they did not offer him a new contract when the current one expired. He was 34 years old, exhausted, and with recurring injuries, so he retired after working in radio for 2 years with the Bengals. After that, no one wanted him. The bastard still had a net worth of about $50 million, about a third or less of what he would have had if not for the lawsuits and bad publicity. Last we heard from him, he had bought 2 car dealerships in California and was back to his old ways. One husband took this very personally, and Mark now walks with a noticeable limp. I doubt he understood anything. I saw his photo in a sports magazine in the "Where Are They Now" section. It was shown at the opening of the 3rd auto show. He had a decent belly and had shaved his head when his baldness began. However, all those millions and his past glory days probably still attracted women. I thought about forwarding the article to Linda. Linda went through a difficult period. The fallout from her public act and the alienation of affection lawsuit that made headlines for weeks followed her around. She quit her old job, saying the load was too heavy to carry every day. She was in a good financial position thanks to her share of Mark's compensation, so she took her time and didn't work for almost a year. She then took a job with a small startup company. She did research and invested $1 million in the startup, gaining a 10% stake in the company. A year later, she was promoted and the company was trying to expand. I researched them out of idle curiosity, and although they had a good product and a good business plan, they were woefully underfunded. I discussed this at length with my investment managers, and when the company went public, I quietly invested $5 million in our children's names and gave Linda the right to vote by proxy. Despite what she did to me, she will always have her children's best interests at heart. This purchase made her the controlling partner. When the business reached the point where functions needed to be separated, she was promoted to vice president of sales and production. Linda worked 50 hours a week or more, but seemed to thrive, and besides, the children were often at my house, fiddling around with their younger brother. Scarlett was 6 years younger and said that one of the conditions of marriage was the birth of at least one child. Daniel Brock, named after his grandfather's, was almost 2, and I was glad that the older children loved him so much because it gave Scarlett a bit of a break. The first thing she did was change her career at my insistence and became a housewife. It was a full-time job with 3 teenagers and a 2-year-old. I'm still a light sleeper, and sometimes I wake up at night and wonder where I would be now if Linda hadn't cheated. Then I noticed something. If I got up to drink water or go to the toilet, Scarlett would become anxious, but as soon as I lay down and touched her, she would fall asleep again. I often woke up with her almost lying on top of me. She seemed to lack happiness and confidence until we physically touched each other. I also realized that we often held hands when we walked or went shopping, unless one of us was taking care of the children. Then her hand was in mine again. I remembered. Linda usually slept as far away from me as possible, saying I made her too hot for comfort, and although we shared intimate touches, they were usually a prelude to sex. We were at our son's graduation party. Scarlett went to take a photo of him with his friends. Linda's new husband went with her because his son and ours were great friends, and that's what brought them together in the first place, as it did with Scarlett and me. They were married for 3 years and seemed happy. She looked at me with sad eyes. Can we talk for a minute? Certainly. And what? I need to tell you something 12 years later. Apology. It took me about 4 years and a little therapy to truly understand what I did to you and the pain you went through. For what it's worth, I'm really sorry. Even today, I can't tell you why I did it and thought everything would be okay. And after years of counseling, I was so angry at you for divorcing me that I couldn't think straight. In my distorted view of reality, it didn't really matter. I had a chance to sleep with someone famous, and I took it without a second thought. I looked, and she smiled. I know. Reality took a long time. Then, about 2 years into my therapy, my counselor asked me who was on your celebrity list. Do you remember? All the people we would sleep with if we were single and had the chance. I immediately thought of Anne Hathaway. Still in love with her. I grinned. Yes, I believe you. I think she's gotten even better with age. Then my consultant asked me how I would feel if we were at a premiere or something, and you had the opportunity to sleep with her. Find someone who would like me will distract, and then leave with her. Then to come home and act like it was nothing, and I wondered why I was so upset. At first I laughed. He would never do something like that to me, I told her. Then she made me think about it as if it really happened and the whole world knew about it. I closed my eyes and turned this thought over in my head. I was almost furious imagining this. That's when the breakthrough happened. No matter how angry I was with you in the fantasy, I actually did the same thing to you, and nothing could change that. So this is my apology. I did wrong, and you had every reason to divorce me. If you had left Anna, I would never have trusted you again, no matter how many times you confessed your love to me and swore that it would never happen again. If I knew then what I know now, I would have laughed in his face when he asked me to dance. I thought about it for a minute. Thank you, Linda. In a way, it makes me feel a little better. I thought about this as I left. The water above the dam is not recycled. Burned bridges are very difficult to rebuild. You accept what life throws at you and do the best you can with what you have. I had a lot with Linda, but with Scarlett, I have everything. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.